Okay. Breath. And when I hear my father dead, I flew 10 hours into the sun. Next morning, I put black on, waistcoat, white shirt, soft pants. The new brown half brogues. The long brakes of the rental car were unsuitable for islands. Every time I fall asleep, I drive in off the road. And when my father's casket was flung open in that chapel, I was not prepared for what I saw. Outside, the sun continued lancing the galvanized, and the San Juan River kept its roll towards the south. And there was no wind, no breath in that hot time, besides the warm air above my father's mouth. The bridge. He is a sour fruit in the mouth of my brother, his third son, the barber. And yet, as sweet as certain fruits are harsh sometimes, on speaking of him, the barber's smile assumes the phantom love a son has for a father. As the imagined image of the broken bridge lingers as an apparition where it once stood or should stand. But do you have specific memories of him? Things I could poem. At the edge of a smile, something else. Gust of the rogue, the saga boy who swooned in and out of their lives those Saturdays, how money hard to find. Yes, but not really, says the barber. He was around. My father has 3 children in Tobago, 2 sons and a daughter. But then another son appears from foreign, who neither the barber knew until he arrived. Dreadlocks, a grown man, another mystery, kin we do not know. Rings. I only have to look at my hands to see my father. The silver ring spans the proximal phalanx of my left hand's ring finger. I remember this ring as a child, asking my father what the raised letters spelled, and he laughed. And like everything else made of secrets, he would not tell. It was only after his funeral, when we were at the house, that his wife brought a bag of his jewels from the bedroom for my brother and I to choose the things we wanted. Even this, being allowed, felt proudly important, a right as his sons, given first choice. They were all things which were either removed from my father's body or kept on his dresser in a saucer beside his Bible. I chose 2 rings, and I finally deciphered that the raised letters simply were his initials, A.H.J., in Western typeface. The ring fit firm and right, warm upon my skin. My brother took the steel link chain. A man who wore 4 silver rings and chains would be hunted down and peppered with blows if he ran away from a job with the workers' pay. He was a charge hand, a lesser foreman, entrusted to oversee and keep morale. He told dirty jokes. He made the men laugh. On Fridays, he handed them brown envelopes of colored notes. But then he disappeared. The men waited in the shade of the office awning, but he never came. Someone heard he left the island by boat that morning. The men vowed to kill him. They had wives and children. The car overturning was at least a year before he left, and not reason enough to leave. He had a young family. It would have been hard for a man to leave, even my father. The hard drive, hard drive, the hard drive. Hard drive, the hard drive. Hard drive. The hard drive. The hard drive. When the car overturned on that hot Tobago road, and my hot foot pump energy, but muscle overwhelm and twist, flash burst in the surf and sky, salt along the highway from Crown Point to Scarborough. Hard drive. Car spin, skid and slash across the pitch. The windshield smash. In the roll and tumble, and my whole life get high beam hectic. They find me inside the wreck alive, but everything changed after that. Sudden so, I start hearing the pull of the horn for home. I want to leave Tobago. I lose my zeal, my spur, my spirit turn from Signal Hill. I want to leave the little family I have. But I come back to Trinidad broken. With my 2 hands swinging, not even a chocolate I bring for my mother, not even a gym boots or a Benny ball I bring for the boy. Summer in New York. He wounded not, so may he escape these people's smoke. Something was happening across East River. Dark was the billow and the sky was obscured by smoke. When the second plane strike, Albert was still in bed. It wasn't the boom that wake him, but his neighbor shouting above her television from downstairs. Put on CNN, Mr. Albert. New York burning down. And when Albert jump up and turn on his little TV, he started to pray as soon as he witnessed that biblical scene in Revelation, the desolation of smoke upon smoke upon smoke. He see building fall. He see people jump from a tower on fire. But his faith was so strong that he visioned them landing safe. The terror overcome them, so they put faith in flight. If it was me, I would have jumped too. He said, it have no shame in that. tumuli in Santa Cruz. Fire for you! Fire for you! Fire for you! And the mothers of the church lit candles upon your breastbone. Fire was lit even in the hole to purify the earth to receive you. They poured flame from brass goblets of croton and pink ixoras and swung a chant to kill death. O death, draw out your sword. Your body lay in the sweet brown. The red church on the hill grew nervous in the noon. The long hearse purred in the sloping yard. Perfume sang from the bosoms of aunts and far cousins. Look out over mountains. Look out where rayo trees are planted on the tumuli of bones, like ladders for spirits to cross into heaven. Oh, fold me in, fold me in, fold me in and fly me around the valley. We shall all be rooted here eventually in this well of ours, eventually. Shame. Shame. I was recording in St. Anne's and I had one day free. So I told my father that I would be back in December, and he said, December? I want to see my son. It's August. Everything is symbolic in literature. The small birds amidst the emptiness of the cricket field at dry noon heat, burning water into sound, driving over the mountain. My father appeared through curtains, frailer in fair, with eyes that saw past the limits of our living eyes. The impish swirl of his laughter was gone. And in the photographs I took that afternoon, he seemed to be leaning away from us. Leaning from life, from love, in shame. Light. Light. Fill the air around these houses. May my grandmother continue to water her roses and touch the aloe fronds in her forever time. Light. As you lit the morning, my father arrived unexpectedly in his new Hillman Hunter. As Mammy ran into the yard to embrace him. And until my grandfather put wire around the veranda, you could sit and swing your legs off the banister, or from the garden, spy up the thighs of my father's new girlfriend. As she laughed with ankles crossed, as he molded his mother's anthuriums, my grandmother fried fish. She ate and was happy. Even as she knew that later that afternoon, my father would be gone into that gone momentum. Broadway, incorrect. Broadway, Broadway. 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 Hear this one. You don't have no shame fathering all them children. You scatter offspring all over the island like seed. Seed that get fling and still sprout when you walk away. Please. How you charm and grind and claim is the woman say she want a child from you. Lie. As if it's trap she trap you. I have an image of you waiting for taxi in Correct Broadway, 1973. In your hot gun mouth pants and your suede boots, knocking the cigarette to the pack and grinning, handsome at sundown. But enters you self when your life force was leaving. Cry and say how you know you wasn't a good father. But it's a long time now, we forgive you. It's a long time now, we forgive you. We forgive you not for what you wasn't. We forgive you because your laughter could pump energy and it could spark up space like matchstick flame. It could spark up the space like matchstick, like flame. Hear this next one. Carnival 1970. Red like blood when blood flash, red like head bust in front Memorial Park. And I have my boy, my firstborn, high up on my shoulder. 1970. Red, but when them fellas clash, I wants no part of that. The stick yard there, but the iron bridge where Swill and Corpuscle get washed down to sea right there too. And the General Hospital and the cemetery there too. Blade must meet razor bump on the back of your head if you feel you're reckless. Cutlass will meet bone, but fling as your flag unfurl like the trombone unfolding from the pump of the throat. Red, but then green there too, and yellow hair too, and orange and the blue that moving through relics of Egypt, ancient kingdoms of Africa. But as we bloom and beautify this history, I have my head on and wondering, is we play the mass, or is the mass that play we? My mother's house. Hear this one. The big man surveyed the house. He said, okay, all you will have to break down to build back that kitchen. While they're building, them pillars could support the bedroom. You and your daughter could stay in there. The living room need new flooring. T&Tech won't connect electric till you fix the roof. The wiring faulty. Fire. You're talking good money. Materials, cement, labor. But you can't live like this, Tina, with termite in ruins. He had left quite Santa Cruz to go up 5 Rivers to see what could be done for Tina and Trish. Tina not even his daughter, but she have his last name. And Baptist, no Baptist. She dies 2 years after Albert. Serpent didn't possess her womb. That was stomach cancer. And within weeks, the house she suffered to save fell down. Yeah. Maestro. Birdhead Sun. On 2nd Avenue, there was the tailor, caper, dark-boned and silent, strolling smooth in his high Clark boots. And then passing the river, there was Sugar Bane, Hmong, half Chinese, a stevedore. Then Redman the thief, Saga Boy the pimp, further up 11th Street. These were my father's friends. They called him Birdhead, because they said his head was too small for his body. And as young men, they fished when the river was good. They climbed trees, picked fruit, still warm from the vine. Much of the same as I would do many years later. My aunt tells me that my father had to leave Mount Lambert because the old bull would terrorize him. How once he drew a shotgun, the same gun he drew at me one night. And just the sight of the barrel was a heavy weight to bear. It slowed me down. I could not move. Walking the avenue, those men knew me before my name. Men who stood on street corners smoking slow cigarettes, who waved at me from the verandas and called me Birdhead Sun. I drive in motor car now. My father is in Mount Lambert with my stepbrother and sister from Tobago. And my grandmother cooks and we eat and play. The children are much younger than me. I have not met them before. To impress my father and his children, I ask him to let me drive his car. And I am surprised when he hands me the keys. But I walk up upon it like a cowboy. I pump and ignite the gas. I feel its danger. I'm reversing to turn around at the corner of 11th Street. But reversing, I mash too fast and lose control. I can't find the brakes. The car ramps a culvert, crunching metal on the side. In the rearview mirror, I see my father standing in the road. He smiles and then bends to catch the damage at the wheel. Cigarette smoke is unfurling from the side of his mouth. El Socorro. El Socorro. My father was not a violent man. There are no reports or rumors of him ever having fought. He did blaze me strict with a belt once, though. Spun me around on the axis of terror as he whipped me in the hot shed. He'd cornered me around Gordon Grant. I remember the absent father's sting of his belt, but not what I had done to deserve it. And there was, near when he died, conflict between him and his daughter's husband when he lived with them in old El Socorro. The husband, a younger man, barebacked and sinister, promised to grin and bring up big gunmen from town if Albert ever feel to guff up and roil about him smoking his weed. It was his house. He was right. At times, my father spoke harshly to his wife, but he was no fighter, no poet, a man. do I know of my father's body? Not even a bottle of duty-free rum, not even a Clark boots. This time I come with both hands swinging, arriving first at the funeral home. But you are already there waiting in your pillow box, exuding a form of warmth. You are my father's body. But now I realize I know little of you. I know the soft weight of your hands at my shoulder at the airport. I know your rings. And I have felt the muscle of your panic wrist once when we were far out and the ocean almost overcame us. I have seen your gut grow into its own haiku, and your head grow mottled and bald. But today it is your chest that I come to know. The rigidity of it is illicit. The crisp sheen of the burial shirt, the marigold in the eye of your lapel. We felt the weight of your body. We felt the weight of your life in your body. When we gripped the casket's chrome handles to lift and carry you down into the hearse, waiting in the bright yard. We slid you to the bare back of the hearse was waiting in the bright yard. Your widow sat swaying upstairs in an air-conditioned chapel where I had sat alone at first, gazing at the ridge of your nose. She could not look into your face. It was the leader of your church who rubbed oil on your lips, who fixed flowers as a garland around your head. A tall, tamarind-colored man, he apologized for having a cold. But he promised to deal with your body in the spiritual way. He wiped the sweat of prayers in a 3-hour service. You looked like my father in the casket, but something was missing. Maybe your mystery revealed as simply a poor man's pride, a man who wore white and 4 silver rings and chains, but whose mother had to make room for in her own grave. Flacken Hathaway. My father would be gone months into mystery. A year without words, out of vision. He existed in our longing. We saw him maybe twice a year, once at Christmas. And while we waited, the myth of him grew from such a powerful absence that what was formed was an image based on slick returns. The way he strode, the dapper cap tilted to the side. He had moved to Tobago and started a new family. So my grandmother and I stood in the kitchen and sang him back with Flack and Hathaway. We called his name that he would come running. When he did, we knew his grin alone would pump energy to irrigate the region. Look at him, high grinning in his Clark boots and his garbadine jumpsuit. Thank you. Rod Youngs, Jason Yarde. Thank you. That's it.
Sure, that's it.
That's it. That's more than it.
Okay. So, Dr. Joseph,
No.
this is poetry like all about, isn't it?
I have yeah. No, I have a couple questions.
For me?
Yeah. Yeah. First question is
When are you going to finish my album?
there's that. But no. You know, the stuff that I read was all about my dad, my experiences with my dad. My dad was absent, and because he was absent, he was even more present because he was absent, you know, because he became this thing. What was your relationship like with your father?
Good question. To be fair, it wasn't the best relationship, you know. And it's interesting now, part of me, I don't know. Yeah, it wasn't the best. He was, I remember spending my third birthday in a mental institution.
Your third birthday?
My third.
You remember that?
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, well,
no.
pictures, there's a lot of visual aids, but, you know, those are my earliest memories.
Wow.
And he was, when I really learnt to appreciate my dad was when I moved away and went to university. Obviously, this is some years later, but just having that distance and not being in the same house with him actually, you know, made a big difference, you know, because I don't know, it's funny now I reflect on my relationship with my son and how much grief I get, and you know, part of me thinks it's some spiritual payback in it. I think he's having a laugh somewhere, you know what I mean?
Right. Where was he from?
Guyana. Both my parents are from
Okay.
Georgetown.
So when you say it was difficult, I mean, why? You know.
Well, I don't know. I suppose it's a cliche thing, you know, mothers and sons and fathers and daughters, you know. But I think there's a as a man, you know, going from boy to man, and you know, one of the abiding memories I have later is when I beat my dad in a race, just running down a road, you know. And just in that, you know, and to me, I was just a young kid, I don't know, 9 or 10, but I was just running my dad. But I could see, like, knowing my age now, where I am, and the energy I have to put into my children. Like, you know, it was a moment when, you know, because, you know, you pretend for a while, you racing your kids and you let them win. But that was you know, I ran and I beat him, and it was like playing, okay? You start thinking about your manhood, your virility, your strength, you know.
Yeah.
And then this young person is basically coming and taking your spot, you know, on one level.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, I grew up with my grandfather. I didn't grow up with my dad. So, yeah, I didn't have that with my grandfather because he was an old man. But he was very, I mean, I got to write about him. He would take another book of sonnets. He was a character. He was very, he was Bajan. His family were from Barbados, and he was very strict. And we weren't blood related. He was basically my
grandmother's husband. You know? Yeah, but I grew up with him, and yeah, he was very strict and very hard. Like if he said you got to be home at 9, 2 minutes past 9, he's got a belt in his hand. You know?
Well, yeah.
And that was the life. Yeah, but my dad was always distant and always somewhere else. And then when he would come, he was a dude. He was a character. He was like swaggering and fancy cars and rings and money and women. And for a while, he was like that, and then that whole thing changed. Yeah. But no, it's interesting that you said that only when you moved away that you began to appreciate it more. It's the same thing, actually. I think they become more present when they're not there. Almost.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had another question as well. The other question was, did it help in the music that we did, in the performance, did it help to have the poems beforehand?
Yes and no. I mean, to be honest, I think it always helps to know what the subject matter is about and to know a shape. But I think certainly for me, I mean, I read maybe half of them, you know what I mean? So but then I think in an improvising context, I think it's important for me to just listen afresh, you know what I mean? Even if I know something, I don't want to, if you're working to a script and you're doing a play, that's different. But in the context of this, where you're actually trying to improvise, I'm more in the moment if I'm actually listening to you.
Yeah.
Afresh,
Right.
Even if I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, it's interesting because I found some of the stuff that you played was really apt to the particular poems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's almost like you kind of knew this melody is going to work here. And I was able. I think it's the dynamics and the story of the music as well, combined with the story of the text.
Mm-hmm.
I think it followed a story, and I was able to write that story as well, and choose certain poems that went along with it. So it's kind of synchronicity going on there.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's it. It's well, as much as you've got a set of poems, you don't necessarily, you're open to changing the order,
Yeah.
And I think that again is part of the improvising dialogue. It's like, well, you hear something, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to do this, and how you respond to it,
Yeah.
and that makes it interesting for all of us, and it allows us all to shape the performance, even though your lyrics are the only known element.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's. So did you have any particular aspirations to how your father, bearing in mind his absence and his subsequent presence by not being around, did you have any aspirations towards his kind of lifestyle, or how did that balance?
Towards his kind of lifestyle? No, I think when I was growing up and I would see my dad, I'd see him like twice a year. For a long period of time, I'd only see him twice a year. But because I lived with his mom, my grandmother, and he was her like, he was her sugar dumpling. He was like her youngest, So she was very fond of him. So she instilled that love in me for him as well, But his life and the way he lived back then was not something that I didn't have the sort of, I wasn't like that. I didn't have that sort of that swagger, that sort of I don't know what you call it. He was a dude, for a while there. What you'd call a dude. He was like, he had children everywhere. I knew that was not me. From an early age, I knew I was never going to be like that. Even though that sort of lifestyle in Trinidad and the Caribbean, that was quite common back then. A lot of people had that lifestyle. A lot of my friends had fathers that were doing the same kind of thing. Itinerant. They had a child here and a child there and a child there, and the baby mothers and blah blah blah. That wasn't me. It was just, it's never been me, because I think growing up with my grandmother, and the people I was surrounded with, I was raised mainly by women, my aunt, my mom, my grandmother. They weren't going to instill that kind of attitude in me, So, and I wasn't like that. And it's interesting talking to him after the fact, after I'd grown up and had my own family and all that, and talking to him about relationships and stuff. He regretted being like that. You know?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He was very. He says, I mean, one of the last things he said to me before he passed was, I know I wasn't a great father. I'm sorry, but it just happened the way it happened. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it took a lot for him to say that.
Sure.
To just say, hey, I know I wasn't a good dad. And when he said it, he was like crying, I knew I wasn't a good dad, that was pretty sad. So yeah, he kind of recognized that the way he lived, not just with me, but with my other brothers, my sisters and stuff, wasn't exactly the right way. And it's still a lot of animosity between him and his children. I mean, I love them, unconditionally, but my brother doesn't. My brother in Trinidad doesn't. My brother in Tobago, no. They have a lot of reservations about him. So yeah, that was that. That was interesting. But yeah, that was it.
I would have had the same reservations
Yeah.
with my dad had I not gone to university.
Right.
And being able to have that distance.
Yeah.
But it's funny you're talking about the beatings. I remember. One of the things, there's so many things to mention, but one of the things when we were learning to read, if you read one word wrong, you get
Oh really?
You get lashed.
Damn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just it was by the time I was even, by the time I was in double figures, the resentments were already there. It's like the fear, the fright. So and it took a long time to get. To just see him as a dude,
Yeah. No, I didn't have that with him really. I mean, like all the time that I'd known my dad, he only gave me licks once, and I write about it. It was such a sweet cut ass. It was such. I mean, I remember when we did this in Trinidad, when we were doing this thing at the university.
Oh yeah.
One of the kids was saying, "Oh, it was so traumatic hearing you read about that stuff. It's so traumatizing." All that. But that's what we went through, man. That's how it was. And there was just once that I remember him actually, holding me and giving me some licks. But I got a lot from my grandfather, so I have that experience with him. But the thing with my dad, the reason why I think I couldn't feel that animosity for him was because he was such a charismatic figure. He was such a charismatic guy. He was like. He would come into a room and be the life of the room, the life of the party, and tell stories and joke and funny and, ridiculously funny and charming. And I admired that because that was I was shy and, introverted, and I was watching that and thinking, wow, that's, I wish I could be like that, So he was like that, and I was in awe of that for a long time. So yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Because to be fair, my dad was very charismatic. He'd be the kind of guy you'd walk down the street to I saw your dad, and everyone knew. Oh, Brother Richard,
Brother Richard.
That's what he so, But I knew what he was like when we get home, so I didn't fall for the romance of it, But it was nice to have a father that everyone got on with,
right.
And kind of seemed to glue certain neighbourhoods together. But when we got back home, it was back another time.
So did he encourage you to do music?
Well, the funny thing is, my mum was really the one who encouraged me with the music. But when I did Top of the Pops, I can't remember what the year was, with M-Beat, Sweet Love, and Sting was on there. And then he saw me on the TV. Then he was like, "Oh, you're doing a proper job now." But until then, that was the hard evidence that he needed. Otherwise, it's like unless you're playing in the church,
right?
Then
right.
And that's a whole other discussion. Is he called our. Did I tell you he called our house God's embassy?
No.
Like it was registered with the post office. The postman would come. Mind you, I think I got out of paying a few student fees because they thought I was the son of an ambassador.
Oh, wow.
But that's another story. I probably shouldn't put that on record, but it's true. Postman would come around and say, "Is this God's embassy?" It's like, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But So, you know,
That's crazy.
it's definitely crazy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Yeah, I think my dad had a funny relationship to me and my work and what I do. In that he was proud. He was extremely proud because I lived. He was first of all proud because I lived in the UK. That was a big deal for him. I lived in the UK and I was studying and I was doing this and
What
you know.
What age? When did you come over? Remind me.
89. I was 22.
No.
Yeah. So yeah, he had that, you know, that pride about that. He would show off and stuff like that. But then when I would write about him, he's like, Tony boy, you put in my put in my business all on the internet. Because so much of the poems were about him, you know, and he would see it, you know, I would read it to him or give him books with it or whatever. And he was like, why are you putting my business? You're telling people all my business, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's cool, man. I want to say thank you for doing it as usual. You know, we go back like car seats. So it's a long time.
As soon as the car seats can move back forward as well.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, it was good
Cool.
session. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, happy to support the good music cause, you know.
Thank you.
I have a question,
Oh.
just a more general
okay.
one. What's the process of putting something together like this? Because most people listening to it will have no idea whether you started, you know, whether you worked together initially, whether the poetry's done first. How long does it take? Is it years? You know, what is just the more kind of nuts and bolts stuff?
Wow.
I mean, I can say for me, I mean, Jason is my MD in the band that we work with. You know, with my band, he's the MD, and we've worked together for a long time. So anything musical that I have to do, I go to him first. You know, and I say, Jason, I got this project to do. Do you want to do it with me? And we just talk about it. You know, so I either go to him or the bass player Andrew. We're very close, but Jason's more. I mean, he's an arranger, he's a composer, you know, multifaceted musician. And he's one of the greatest musicians I know. I'm not joking. No, this is serious shit. You know, he's one of the greatest musicians that I know. So I go to him and I say, I want to do this. So for instance, this project, I say, you know, I wanted to do this with my dad. About my dad, it's going to be just you and Rod. And I know he gets it. And I know that he plays and he likes the music that I like. So I don't have to say to him, man, I want it to be like this or that. You know, whatever he plays, I'm cool with, you know. So that's great. We have that. I'm lucky in that way. So that's how it works. So I just go to him and say, I want to do this. And he would ask a few questions. How do you want it? Ding, ding, ding. And it's done. There's not a lot of, I don't have to do a lot of back and forth about it. Yeah, that's how it works for me. So all I had to do was plant the seed and say we're doing this on the 10th of October. It's going to be you and me and Rod. No rehearsal, improv. It's about my dad. Read some of the poems, and we turn up, and I know I'm in a safe pair of hands.
Yeah.
You know.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
So how many years have you two been working together then? Because it's obvious that there is, you know, a really amazing relationship artistically.
How long? The first time I worked on anything
Is it Jerry's?
with
Jerry?
No. It was Mango Lick.
Oh yeah, of course, probably.
Yeah, going back to the 90s, mid 90s probably.
Well, Malika, we talked about Malika earlier.
Yeah.
We got a look when the whole Urban Poets Society, right?
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't part of that, but
But
the
a lot
Mango
of that
Lick,
scene.
yeah,
Yeah.
Mango Lick thing came out of that with
Yeah.
Vanessa Richards and Caffrey Riley. This is going back to the 90s, mid 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, early. Yeah.
yeah. So
Early
since
90s,
then,
And Anthony, when you're writing poetry, is it all of your poetry that you think this would be a great music collaboration, or is it just certain pieces that you think this would work really well?
I think I consider myself a musician. Jason calls me a musician.
Yeah.
So when I write poetry, it's always musical. It always has a musical element to it. It might be a different kind of music. It might be very angular, but there's musicality in the way it's said, in the way it's written, and the way it's laid out on the page. I always think in a musical sense. So it always can be adapted to a rhythm or a key or whatever, you know. I'm always aware of that. It's just how I write. Even fiction, for me, it's rhythm. I guess because I'm Trinidadian or whatever, there's this inner sort of rhythmic base to what I do. So yeah, I always think musically.
Yeah.
I think a poet is a kind of musician, really. Most poets are, you know. You talk in the same language, lyrics and rhythm and meter and verses, you know. It's very similar. It's like a spoken music.
I mean, the other thing for me is well, I know Anthony's got one of the biggest record collections of anybody I know, you know, musician, poet, or whatever, you know. And I think, you know, I know on a day-to-day basis he listens to more music than I do, and for pleasure as well, which is an important thing, you know. I consciously have to make a decision to just listen to music, remember why I got into music, and listen to music for pleasure, because it's my work, you know. And there's always going to be, you know, out of 100 things, there's always going to be 90 things that I must listen to because it's my work, whereas opposed to just buying a record, putting it on, and being like, yeah, I dig this, you know. And for, you know, Anthony has the privilege, if you like, of being in that, you know, he's a music fan, you know, as well, you know, so I say he's a musician, but he's a lover of music, and that comes through, as he says, that comes through in the writing. And so he's able to reference all these things, you know, and mention this recording or that recording of this artist, and, you know, pull the vinyl off the shelf and be like, oh, have you checked this, you know. And I know, you know, well, I would lament about my vinyl connection, but this is probably not the right time for it. But yeah, it's that kind of research, if you like, you know, just for the medium, and then that's a very easy thing to marry up. Is I mean, one of the things that has developed, I think, is at first is finding a space, you know what I mean, and that's been something that's definitely developed over time. It's like, because I think the first time, you know, I mean, as Anthony said, I did the Mango Lick, and I've done so many different tours with poets. Some often just me and effects, and just myself and the poet, you know, Malika, Kate Tempest, whoever it's been, and it's a different relationship each time. The principles are the same. The music serves the lyrics. And once you agree that, then it's just about, you know, sometimes I won't play just because it's like, well, I don't need to play, you know. But then it's just that thing of knowing that the music serves the lyrics, and once that's the key, I think. And by the same token, when you perform in these kinds of things, particularly with a drummer like Rod, or when you have to listen in a three-way, it's one thing if it's a dialogue, but when you have to listen in a three-way, then it is this thing of Anthony having to give space, you know, because it's like, well, all right, well, for us to do something to answer him, it becomes more of this kind of round the table discussion, you know, and it's like for us to put his lyrics in the best light, he must give us space, you know, and it's that give and take. And that's something that, I mean, yeah, the fact that we did this today, and it's the first time we've done it in this format, comes from all of our collective kind of listening and playing together, but away in different situations, and then just understanding that, you know, what the one thing is we're trying to serve, you know.
Yeah, because there was such a beautiful conversation between the music and the poetry that it really seemed almost impossible to believe it was improvised, you know. It just seemed like you must have had discussions before, especially around where to give Anthony space to just let the poetry shine. So the last question I wanted to ask Jason was actually, how did you feel when you first read these poems? Because they are very emotional.
Yeah, I mean, it's I guess the thing I had, well, as Anthony says, I've been his MD for some years now, and I don't know whether the privilege is the right word, but we were, you know, we were recording, it was it Caribbean Roots and People in the Sun now? We were recording when your father actually passed away.
People of the sun.
So we were in Trinidad, and your father was already ill, right? And so the fact that we were in Trinidad and we were recording some of these songs, so and some of the poetry was familiar to me because I get, Anthony has this thing of the cross-pollinating, I guess, lyrics from, you might hear a little snippet of something that he's written in a book or in one of the sonnets that might turn up in a lyric. So, I was kind of familiar. I knew the story of his father, you know what I mean? And to be in we'd come back and then he died, right?
Yeah.
So we were literally going through the process of doing the album. So, so in a way, before even reading the poems, because I felt was practically part of that story because I was in the country. Anthony would be wherever we went and be like, I've got to go off and see my dad, and then he'd come back. Because I was there for a good while after we did the session, and then just finishing stuff in Port of Spain. So I feel like I was kind of in the story. So in that sense, it made it quite easy reading the poems because I was very familiar with.
And it really came across in the performance as well because you matched the intensity and just found the emotional resonance so beautifully, which is why I was quite surprised when you said it was completely improvised because I assumed there were quite long conversations happening. So amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the beauty of get the right casting. You don't have to say too much. It's like you just let people do their thing.
Exactly.
So that's the nub. It's like if you got the right ingredients, then you can cut down the baking time.
Okay, guys. Well, thank you, and I think that's a wrap. Amazing.
Thank you.
So we keep, because you will keep waffling.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.